Welcome to this introduction to Dr. Vada's manual lymph drainage. Before I get started with the program, I'd like to tell you a little bit about who I am and why I'm doing this. My name is Anne Bramham. I've been an instructor for the Dr. Vada School for almost 20 years and a practitioner for longer. Dr. Vada's manual lymph drainage has played a significant role in my life, both as a professional practitioner and in my personal life. And during this introduction, I'll actually take some time to tell you a couple of stories about how. In the meantime, I'd just like to say that it has been a real gift to me, and I really am looking forward to sharing some of this information with you. So first and foremost, let's talk about Dr. Vada's manual lymph drainage. The technique was started with Dr. Emil Vada. Dr. Emil Vada began, although from Denmark, began his research and practice in the southern climes of the south of France. Why the south of France is because, like all northerners, they seek the sunshine. So the south of France in the early 1900s, the turn of the 20th century and upwards, was a very fashionable place to be. Dr. Vada was there with his wife Astrid, who was a naturopath physician, and they began a clinic together. And they were working in the south of France and came across lots of sickly Brits like me with lots of sinus problems, also like me. Upon palpation and working with these patients, Dr. Vada actually discovered that they had swollen lymph nodes in their neck. They carried a lot of congestion and their lymph nodes were swollen. And although the lymphatic system was not much known about, not talked about, not explored by the medical system, Dr. Vada realized that there was a huge connection here, and that this began his exploration of working with the lymphatic system. What happened is that, please, back to remembering this is a fashionable place, is that his clients would be taking their daily stroll along the seafront in this wonderful seaside resort town, and primarily they were out meeting their friends, and their friends would say, "Oh my goodness, you look wonderful. What have you been doing? Have you been doing that rejuvenation cure?" So Dr. Vada actually started his practice at the same time as the Leprari Clinic in Switzerland was also building its reputation for live cell therapy. And they said, "Oh, absolutely not. I've been taking this work from this fellow Vada who's been working for my sinuses." And they said, "Oh, well, you look wonderful." And of course the conversation went on. Not only did they look wonderful, they felt better. And then being told they looked wonderful, they felt even better. So primarily, as this moved forward, he gained a reputation, not just for the therapeutic work he did, but for the aesthetic work he did. So let's fast forward a few years. In 1936, he presented his first paper to the Congress of Versailles. And the Medical Congress of Versailles, they primarily rejected his findings. However, the Medical Aesthetic Congress did not. They took a great interest in this work, and it was actually the aesthetic field that's maintained and kept hold of the practice of manual lymph drainage and it was introduced into many aesthetic practices. In 1939, the Second World War broke out throughout Europe, and everybody had to return to their native territory, their native region. So Dr. Varda and his wife returned to Copenhagen, Denmark, where they, after the war, established a practice. But they didn't stay there totally. They ventured out into Germany, and in Germany Dr. Varda began his research with Professor Mislin and Professor Foldy. And in working with these two professors, they began some very stringent research into the practical and physical effects of lymph drainage. What they found out was primarily that there was volume reduction in the tissues of edematous patients, and they could physically measure this volume reduction, chart it, record it. Therefore, this was moved into a registered physical therapy, and in 1960 it became proclaimed as a physical therapy which could be reimbursed through the social medicine system. During this period, Dr. Varda had teamed up with Gunther Wittlinger, and if you look at this picture here, you'll actually see on the right, as you look at it, is Astrid Varda. On the left, as you look at it, is Emil Varda, and right there in the center is Gunther Wittlinger. Gunther Wittlinger was, you might say, the disciple of Varda, and he worked with him side by side, practicing this technique. Hildegard, his wife, was my mentor, my instructor, who introduced me to this technique. And she has some wonderful stories to tell of Gunther, who was very tall, very large hands, working on tiny rats to measure the rate at which their lymph flowed. So you can imagine the amount of discipline and work that was put into this therapy years back doing the research. And Gunther Wittlinger was there, a part of it. Emil Varda handed over the instruction of his technique, Dr. Varda's manual lymph drainage, to the Wittlingers, and they founded the International Institute of Manual Lymph Drainage, of Dr. Varda's manual lymph drainage. And I am a teacher for this institute. I think there's a lot to be said for this. One of the things that I always say to my students is I hope they have the opportunity at some time to immerse themselves further into this and to hear some of the stories that were passed on to me in my training. But just to move forward with this, I think that this is very timely. Has anybody actually seen this book, the title, The Power of One? What one person can bring into the world. Well, if you look at this, and if you now look at how extensive manual lymph drainage is, you will see that Dr. Varda created something absolutely incredible. One person who had a will and a determination, an absolute belief that his technique would make a difference, has actually proved. Almost 100 years later, this technique is now recognized internationally as the most accredited and efficient treatment for lymphedema and for other pathologies. Now, I'm not here to talk about lymphedema. I'm here to talk about all the other things that it's good for. But before I go on, let's just take a look at this background of the power of one. So we have Emil Vodder, supported by his wife Astrid, busy in the south of France, and then their own clinic in Copenhagen. That then moved to Austria under the auspices of Gunther and Hildegard Wittlinger, who began the Dr. Vodder School, and whose sons now run that school. Meanwhile, Hildegard has moved out internationally through the world. She's trained in Europe, Ireland, the United Kingdom, Israel, and here in Canada. Robert Harris has taken over the North American school, and you can see that the training there is extended to Singapore, Japan, Australia, Brazil, Korea, New Zealand, and of course right throughout the United States. I fit between that. I came in as a Brit, training in America. I certified in Europe, but then I also brought Hildegard over here to teach classes as I did my teacher training. So just a little bit of background on Dr. Vodder's manual lymph drainage and its climb to recognition of where it is today. One thing I do want to say right now